The year is 2013. The Ravens were fresh off their emotional Super Bowl win over San Francisco in the Harbaugh Bowl. Ray Lewis rode off into retirement, while Ed Reed and other starters left too. But the hot topic was now the divisive Joe Flacco, who just signed a 6-year, $120 million deal after a legendary playoff run. The debate of all debates was whether he was elite or not. And while Pittsburgh's defense was aging, Andy Dalton and A.J. Green had taken the Bengals to back-to-back playoff appearances in their first 2 seasons. But the 49ers were primed to get back to the Super Bowl after Colin Kaepernick took the league by storm and nearly won the Lombardi Trophy in his first season at the helm. Jim Harbaugh's roster was stacked. Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Aldon Smith, Frank Gore, and Ron Jaworski was pounding his fists on the table, claiming Kaepernick had the potential to be the greatest quarterback in NFL history. But Russell Wilson also impressed mightily as a rookie. The Legion of Boom was fully formed, and they came oh so close to an NFC Championship appearance in 2012. Everyone was predicting it would come down to Seattle and San Francisco for the conference. Green Bay was not to be overlooked though. Along with Aaron Rodgers, the Packers had hope that rookie running back Eddie Lacy could provide the complementary rushing attack that had been non-existent for years. But reigning MVP Adrian Peterson was going to have to put the Vikings on his back once again, with Christian Ponder remaining under center. And the AFC now revolved around Peyton Manning. Denver watched a potential championship season end in double overtime against Baltimore in the playoffs. So they added Wes Welker on top of Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker. Von Miller would miss 6 games due to suspension, but this was a Super Bowl roster. But New England entered the year under a cloud of uncertainty. Aaron Hernandez had been arrested in June on murder charges, Rob Gronkowski was recovering from surgery, and Wes Welker was off to Denver. So Tom Brady was left throwing to rookies and cast-offs. Optimism was rampant in Houston though. The Texans went 12-4 in 2012 thanks to an all-time dominant J.J. Watt season, and Matt Schaub was good enough for many analysts to pick Houston as the biggest threat to Denver in the AFC. But Andrew Luck was entering year 2 after dragging the Colts to an 11-5 record as a rookie, so another leap was expected for the NFL's babyface. Shifting to the NFC South, Atlanta went 13-3 in 2012 and were a blown lead away from the Super Bowl. But the Saints were getting Sean Payton back after his suspension, Carolina's Kuechly-led defense was becoming one of the fastest units in football, and Tampa Bay added Darrelle Revis. But in the NFC East, the biggest question was RG3's health. After one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time ended with a torn ACL in the playoffs, his recovery and the tension it created between him and head coach Mike Shanahan hung over the franchise. And Philadelphia turned the page to Chip Kelly, bringing his lightning-quick college tempo to the pros to inject energy into the Eagles' stale offense after firing Andy Reid, who went to a 2-14 yet very talented Chiefs team, returning 6 Pro Bowlers. Once Alex Smith was acquired from the 49ers, they were viewed as a dark horse playoff team. Let me tell you about a moment I think everyone has had. You check your bank account and you're fine, and then in the same 24 hours, your car needs a repair, groceries are higher than expected, and a bill you forgot about hits early. It's not that you're irresponsible, it's just bad timing. That gap before payday can feel way more stressful than it should, and that's why I recommend Clover. Clover is an earned wage access app that allows you to access up to $400 before payday, with no credit check, no interest, and no late fees. You're simply accessing money you've already earned. You can wait a few days for the transfer, or if you need it immediately, pay a small fee to get it instantly. And there's no monthly membership required to get in advance. I also appreciate how transparent Clover is. They make money through brand partnerships inside the app and the optional instant transfer fees, not hidden charges. The whole mission is to give people a fair alternative and help end predatory lending. So if you're short on cash, access up to $400 with no credit check or late fees, and click the link so they know I sent you. The season opened with Denver hosting Baltimore in a playoff rematch, but this time Peyton Manning got his revenge, embarrassing the defending champions with a record-tying 7 touchdown passes in a 49-27 win that immediately set the tone for the year. Tight end Julius Thomas emerged as Manning's new favorite red zone target, and Denver's offense made a better first impression than anyone could have dreamt of. Manning threw 16 touchdowns without an interception in September, putting Denver on pace for one of the greatest offensive seasons the league had ever seen, averaging 45 points per game. But Andy Reid's first month with the Chiefs also could not have gone any better. They beat the Eagles in Reid's return to Philly, then humiliated the Giants 31-7 to start 4-0. A defense led by Justin Houston, Tamba Ali, and Eric Berry forced 12 turnovers already, and the Chiefs were reborn. But Seattle wasted no time making a statement of their own. Hosting the 49ers in Week 2, the potential NFC Championship preview turned into a 29-3 rout. The Seahawks then erased a massive deficit to defeat Houston in overtime and stake their claim as the most dangerous team in the NFC. San Francisco remained formidable though. In Week 1, Kaepernick lit Green Bay up for 412 yards and 3 touchdowns in a shootout win. Elsewhere in the NFC, the return of Sean Payton revitalized New Orleans. After a disastrous 2012 without their head coach, the Saints opened 4-0 with 20-plus point blowouts of the Cardinals and Dolphins. New England also found ways to win, though in far less convincing fashion with Gronkowski still sidelined. A Week 1 comeback against Buffalo was followed by wins over the Jets, Bucks, and Falcons. It wasn't pretty, but New England reached October unbeaten. And in Week 3, Andrew Luck led the Colts to a convincing 27-7 win over the 49ers. Just days earlier, the Colts stunned the league by trading a first-round pick to Cleveland for running back Trent Richardson. The former third overall pick in the 2012 draft, Richardson was set to become the long-term answer in their backfield and give Luck another weapon for a playoff push. But the team that many had picked to challenge Denver didn't look nearly as comfortable as expected. Houston started 2-0 but lost to the Ravens and then Seahawks in overtime to fall right back to 500. And Matt Schaub began to write himself into the history books for the worst reason. But Chip Kelly's NFL debut brought immediate fireworks. The Eagles beat the Redskins 33-27 in a game where Kelly's up-tempo offense ran 53 plays in the first half alone. But on the opposite sideline, RG3 clearly didn't look like the same explosive quarterback from his rookie season. Unfortunately, the Eagles went on to lose their next 3, concluding the month with a 52-20 loss to Denver. Things were even worse for the 0-4 Giants, who were outscored 69-7 in weeks 3 and 4. But the Vikings also lost their first 3 games, while Peterson continued carrying the offense almost single-handedly. And after years of conservative philosophy under Lovie Smith, the Bears burst out of the gates under new head coach, the mad scientist Mark Trestman. Jay Cutler had weapons everywhere with Brandon Marshall, second-year wideout Alshon Jeffrey, and Matt Forte catching passes out of the backfield. Chicago opened 3-0, including a primetime win over Pittsburgh, where the Bears defense scored 2 touchdowns of its own. After an amazing September, Peyton Manning's historic pace continued in October. Through 6 games, he had 22 touchdown passes, but the Broncos finally met their match in Week 7 when Manning returned to Indianapolis to face his former team. In a highly anticipated meeting with Andrew Luck, the Colts handed Denver their first loss of the season, winning 39-33 and proving they were ready to contend in the AFC. But 2 weeks earlier, Denver was wrapped up in one of the greatest shootouts in NFL history. Facing Tony Romo, Manning threw for 414 yards and 4 touchdowns as the Broncos escaped with a 51-48 victory. The two offenses combined for over 1,000 yards in a back-and-forth scoring frenzy that resembled more college than NFL. Romo nearly pulled out the win, but an interception set up the Matt Prater game winner for the Broncos. The Chiefs extended their undefeated start to 8-0, as Jamaal Charles was scoring touchdowns in bunches to go along with their playmaking defense. And their division rival Phillip Rivers was enjoying a career revival under new head coach Mike McCoy. After several disappointing seasons, Rivers looked like his old Pro Bowl self again, already logging 3 400-yard games. 4-3 San Diego pulled off impressive wins over the Colts and Jags, signaling that they might be more competitive than expected. And in Week 6 against the Saints, Brady delivered one of the most clutch moments of the season, throwing a game-winning touchdown to rookie Kembrell Tompkins with 5 seconds left. But Matt Schaub endured one of the most bizarre stretches anyone's ever seen, throwing a pick six in 4 straight games as the Texans' promising season turned into one giant losing streak. Elsewhere, Dallas and Philly traded control of the NFC East throughout the month as the Eagles turned to Nick Foles after Michael Vick went down. Chicago's early momentum began to slow as injuries mounted, including a groin injury to Jay Cutler that forced the Bears to rely on backup Josh McCown. However, Alshon Jeffrey was turning into a superstar with his 218-yard showing against the Saints. The 49ers rebounded from their early struggles with an absolutely dominant undefeated October, but Carolina also rattled off 4 straight wins from week 6 to 9, scoring at least 30 points in each game while holding opponents to 15 or less. And in week 8, Calvin Johnson had a historic game against the Cowboys, catching 14 passes for 329 yards, the second most receiving yards ever in a single game. Stafford capped a wild day with a last-second fake spike touchdown, giving the Lions a 31-30 victory to improve to 5-3, good for second place in the NFC North. But in the AFC North, the Bengals were separating themselves as the division's most complete team with their defensive front and strong play from Andy Dalton, who threw 5 touchdown passes in a Week 8 win over the Jets, 4 of which went to Marvin Jones. The Ravens struggled to find consistency, while Pittsburgh was trying to pick themselves up from an 0-4 start. Even Cleveland briefly joined the mix after turning to quarterback Brian Hoyer, who won back-to-back games before suffering a season-ending injury in Week 5. November brought one of the most anticipated games of the season, when the undefeated Chiefs traveled to Denver in Week 11 to face the Broncos. Kansas City entered the matchup 9-0, but the showdown ultimately proved what some suspected. Denver's offense was simply too explosive, and the Broncos handed the Chiefs their first loss of the season with a 27-17 victory that re-established Denver as the favorite in the AFC, until the very next week when they visited New England in Week 12. Peyton seemingly buried Tom Brady with a 24-0 halftime lead, but the Patriots clawed their way back into the game, forcing turnovers and capitalizing on Denver mistakes to take the lead early in the fourth. A game-tying Demaryius Thomas touchdown sent it to OT, where New England completed the improbable comeback after a muff punt set up Gostkowski's game-winning field goal, giving the Patriots a 34-31 win and adding another chapter to the legendary Brady-Manning rivalry. However, the Broncos promptly regained their footing the following week, returning home to defeat the Chiefs once again in Week 13, 35-28. But the NFC North race took an unfortunate turn when Aaron Rodgers suffered a broken collarbone against the Bears in Week 9. The injury turned what looked like a likely Packers division title into one of the league's most unpredictable battles. Green Bay went winless in November despite Eddie Lacy's best efforts. The Panthers confirmed they were a legit NFC contender with a Monday night home win over New England, though. With their elite defense and an increasingly confident Cam Newton, Carolina capped off their 8-game win streak with a 27-6 win over the Bucs. However, Nick Foles produced perhaps the most shocking individual performance of the year when he threw 7 touchdowns in a blowout of the Raiders. The young quarterback's unforeseen breakout added another twist to the already chaotic NFC East race as Philly went undefeated this month. But that was nothing compared to Josh Gordon. In consecutive weeks, he went off for 237 yards against the Steelers and then 261 against the Jaguars, becoming the first player to ever record back-to-back 200-yard receiving games and turning into the league's most unstoppable receiver virtually overnight. But in a massive Monday night game against the Saints, Seattle put on one of the most impressive team performances of the season, crushing the Saints 34-7. Russell Wilson threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, feeding the belief that the Seahawks were the team to beat in the NFC. And the biggest off-field story of the month came in Miami, where the Dolphins were engulfed in controversy after offensive lineman Jonathan Martin left the team and allegations of bullying surfaced involving Richie Incognito. The situation became a national story and cast a dark cloud over Miami's already mediocre season. As we entered the stretch run, Peyton Manning continued to reach new heights. He threw at least 4 touchdowns in 4 of their final 5 games, and by season's end, he'd thrown a record 55 touchdowns with 5,500 yards, while the Broncos set a new NFL record with 606 total points. For the cherry on top, Matt Prater even made a record 64-yard field goal. The eye-popping season got them the AFC's top seed, and this doesn't need to be said, but Peyton Manning won his record 5th MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. At the same time, Jamaal Charles finished off one of the most electrifying running back campaigns of the decade. He totaled just under 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 19 touchdowns, including an unforgettable Week 15 performance against the Raiders, where he scored 5 times and had 195 yards receiving. But 1 week earlier, a Week 14 loss to the 49ers nearly cost Seattle the number 1 seed, but they hung on despite San Francisco ending the year on a 6-game win streak. And after beginning 1-3, the Panthers ended 12-4. Ron Rivera was Coach of the Year, Luke Kuechly was Defensive Player of the Year, and their only loss after Week 5 came against the Saints in Week 14. New Orleans finished 11-5, while Breeze threw for nearly 5,200 yards and 39 touchdowns, 16 of which went to Jimmy Graham. The Ravens tried to save their season with 4 straight wins from weeks 12 through 15, highlighted by a crazy finish against the Vikings. In the final 2 minutes alone, the teams combined for 5 touchdowns in a blur of long runs and kickoff returns. But despite moments like that, and Justin Tucker booting a 61-yarder to beat the Lions in Week 15, losses in the final 2 weeks left the Ravens at 8-8, outside of the playoffs. However, the Bengals completed one of the best regular seasons in franchise history, finishing 11-5 and winning the AFC North. The Steelers impressively finished 8-8 after an 0-4 start, but the early hole was too much to overcome. And their division wasn't just competitive in the standings, it was loaded with elite young receiving talent. The AFC North featured 3 of the top 5 wideouts in the game, with AJ Green, Antonio Brown, and Josh Gordon's 1,646 yards in 14 games. In Week 14, Philly hosted their iconic snow game against the Lions, with heavy snowfall turning the field into a winter landscape. LaShawn McCoy added 217 yards to his rushing title campaign, and the Eagles won 34-20 in one of the greatest weather games of the decade. But the NFC East came down to a winner-take-all in Week 17 between the Cowboys and Eagles. With Tony Romo out with a back injury, the Cowboys season ended disappointingly, as the Eagles escaped with a 24-22 victory and the division title. But the Redskins season reached a sad point, when after a long soap opera, Mike Shanahan benched RG3 for the final 3 games. Griffin was never the same, and so the Kirk Cousins era began. And along with a 249-yard, 2-touchdown game from Alshon Jeffrey in Week 13, Chicago also received a spark from Josh McCown. Filling in for Jay Cutler, McCown threw 13 touchdowns to 1 interception while keeping the Bears in the playoff race. His play set the stage for Cutler's return and the Week 17 clash that would ultimately decide the NFC North. Because after missing 2 months, Aaron Rodgers came back for the season finale against the Bears. Rookie of the Year Eddie Lacy scored early in the 4th, then, facing a 4th and 8 in the closing minute, Rodgers connected with Randall Cobb for a 48-yard touchdown that gave Green Bay the victory and the division title in one of the most clutch plays of Rodgers' career. San Diego, too, needed a Week 17 win over Kansas City to stay alive. The Chargers won that in overtime, taking the final AFC wildcard spot, and Phillip Rivers was the comeback player of the year. Meanwhile, the AFC South told a tale of 2 very different seasons. The Texans lost their final 14 games, while Andrew Luck led Indy to an 11-5 record and the AFC South title. The Patriots were victims of bad luck in Week 14, when Gronkowski tore his ACL during a massive comeback win against the Browns, just as the playoffs were approaching. Yet perhaps the most unlucky team of the year was the Cardinals, who finished 10-6 with a fantastic defense, but still missed the playoffs in the brutally competitive NFC West. In the 2013 AFC wildcard round, the Colts pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in NFL playoff history, coming back from a 38-10 third-quarter deficit to defeat the Chiefs 45-44. Luck threw for 443 yards and 4 touchdowns while scoring 35 second-half points, namely a 64-yard go-ahead TD to T.Y. Hilton. The incredible choke job extended Kansas City's postseason win drought to 20 years. After that, Drew Brees threw for 250 against Philly, while Mark Ingram powered the ground attack. The Eagles took the lead with 5 minutes left, but a strong kickoff return set up the final drive. where recently signed kicker Shane Graham drilled the game-winning field goal as time expired to give New Orleans a 26-24 victory and its first road playoff win in franchise history. Next, the Chargers took out the Bengals by winning the turnover battle and shutting down their offense after halftime. San Diego forced 4 turnovers and stopped 2 fourth-down attempts. A 58-yard Ronnie Brown touchdown sealed the upset victory 27-10. And in frigid conditions at Lambeau Field, the 49ers once again eliminated the Packers because of the dynamic Kaepernick, who totaled 325 yards of offense, extending drives with his legs while connecting with Michael Crabtree for big gains. After Green Bay tied it with 5 minutes left, Kaepernick drove 65 yards to set up Phil Dawson's game-winning kick. Kicking off divisional weekend, the Seahawks leaned on their defense and ground game to control the Saints at CenturyLink Field. Marshawn Lynch ran for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, helping Seattle build an early 16-0 lead. Lynch's long fourth-quarter touchdown sent Seattle to the NFC Championship with a comfortable win. Saturday night against the poor Colts, LeGarrette Blount rushed for 166 yards and 4 touchdowns, as New England totaled 234 team rushing yards and 6 rushing scores. To make matters worse, the defense intercepted Andrew Luck 4 times, easily earning another AFC Championship berth 43-22. Next, San Francisco forced 2 Cam Newton interceptions and sacked him 5 times while scoring 17 unanswered points after trailing 10-6. Kaepernick had both a passing and rushing touchdown, while Anquan Boldin shined with 136 yards receiving in the win. And on Sunday night, the Broncos took a 17-0 lead after 2 Peyton Manning touchdowns. But Phillip Rivers connected with rookie Keenan Allen for 2 fourth-quarter scores of their own to make it a 10-point game with under 6 minutes left. However, the Broncos would ultimately drain the final 4 minutes of the clock to advance to the AFC Championship. And in the AFC Championship, Denver's offense was nearly flawless, totaling over 500 yards without a turnover or sack. Manning completed 32 passes for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, targeting Demaryius Thomas heavily in the second half and finding him for a third-quarter touchdown that extended their lead to 20-3. Brady made it interesting in the fourth quarter, throwing a touchdown to Edelman and adding a rushing score, but Demaryius Thomas finished with 134 yards, and kicker Matt Prater drilled 4 field goals to seal a 26-16 victory and send the Broncos to the Super Bowl. In the NFC, a 58-yard run from Colin Kaepernick led to an Anthony Dixon touchdown to give the 49ers a 10-0 second-quarter lead. But a 40-yard Marshawn Lynch touchdown tied it in the third. Kaepernick answered with a 26-yard score to Boldin, but Seattle seized momentum in the fourth quarter when Wilson hit Jermaine Kearse for the go-ahead touchdown, Navarro Bowman tore his ACL, and then Cam Chancellor's interception helped set up a field goal to make it 23-17. Still, the 49ers had a shot. Kaepernick targeted Crabtree in the end zone, but Richard Sherman deflected the pass, and Malcolm Smith snagged the game-clinching interception. Moments later, Sherman delivered his now legendary post-game rant, shouting that he was the best corner in the game and not to try him with a sorry receiver like Crabtree. Super Bowl 48 immediately became one of the most one-sided championships of all time as the Seahawks trampled the Broncos from the opening seconds. On Denver's first play, a miscommunication sent the snap sailing past Manning into the end zone, resulting in a safety and the fastest score in Super Bowl history. After the free kick, a pair of Seattle field goals followed to extend the lead to 8-0, while Denver's record-setting offense could barely move the ball. The game truly got out of hand in the second quarter, when Manning finally had Denver moving downfield, but Cliff Averill hit him as he threw, causing a floating pass that was intercepted by linebacker Malcolm Smith and returned 69 yards for a touchdown, pushing Seattle's lead to 22-0 and sending America into shock. The Broncos turned it over on downs on their final drive of the half, heading to the locker room scoreless. And if the Broncos had any hope of a comeback, it disappeared on the very first play out of halftime. Matt Prater sent a short kickoff that bounced off the grass. Percy Harvin, who had pretty much taken the season off, fielded the ball and exploded up the field for an 87-yard touchdown and one of the most decisive moments in Super Bowl history. But Seattle wasn't done. Wilson hit Jermaine Kearse on a slant for a dazzling 23-yard touchdown after he broke multiple tackles on his way into the end zone. Denver finally got on the board shortly thereafter with a Demaryius Thomas touchdown and 2-point conversion, cutting the deficit to 36-8. But Wilson led another scoring drive, connecting with Doug Baldwin for a 10-yarder to effectively end the game with 12 minutes left. Statistically, Seattle dominated across the board. Wilson completed 18 of 25 passes for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns. On defense, Malcolm Smith was named MVP, helping limit Denver to 8 points when they hadn't scored less than 24 all year. The Seahawks won their first championship in one of the most dominant displays in Super Bowl history, and the first NFL game to ever end 43-8.